The Legend of Zelda's gods keep saving Hyrule by bearing its disasters. Generations after the Hero of Time disappeared, Ganondorf broke his seal. The gods answered by sealing him and the entire kingdom of Hyrule beneath the Great Sea. King Daphnis Nohansen. Hyrule watched the chosen survivors reach the mountaintops above. That's why today I'm breaking down 12 of the biggest unsolved mysteries in The Legend of Zelda and what they actually reveal about this world, starting with the flood that was supposed to be a rescue. The Great Flood, the sea chart in the Wind Waker divides the Great Sea into 49 sectors. While the old kingdom of Hyrule lies sealed beneath the waves, players sail across looking for treasure. The opening legend presents what happened next as the gods' answer to Hyrule's prayers. King Daphnis Nohansen. Hyrule, long afterward standing in the ruins of his own kingdom, describes it more like a decision made under a deadline. Here's the sequence. Generations later, Ganondorf broke free of his seal, and the timing could not have been worse. Hyrule waited for a hero to answer the threat the way the old stories promised, the way the legends promised. Nobody came. The people prayed to the gods, and the gods responded by flooding the kingdom of Hyrule and burying it beneath the waves, commanding those they had chosen to take refuge on the mountaintops, while the game leaves the exact origin of each present-day island unstated. King Daphnis lays this out himself inside the ruins of the drowned castle, generations after the fact. He confirms that the gods sealed away both Ganon and Hyrule itself, and that the kingdom was buried beneath the waves. He confirms that the gods chose certain people and commanded them to take refuge on the mountaintops, though the game never explains the full criteria for that selection. Hyrule was buried beneath the waves, and the game does not record the fate of people who were not among the chosen group, part of a kingdom the gods chose to seal away with Ganon while preserving selected people on higher ground. This traces back to one specific fork in the story. At the end of Ocarina of Time, Princess Zelda sends the Hero of Time back to his childhood, leaving the adult timeline without him. Later, when Ganondorf returns, the people pray to the gods and Hyrule is flooded. Nothing in the games states outright that his absence forced the gods' hand, but the timing lines up with uncomfortable precision. The hero the people expected had already been removed from the adult timeline before the crisis began. The gods chose the tool the game actually shows them using. They sealed Ganon and the whole kingdom of Hyrule beneath the waves, leaving selected people to rebuild on higher ground. That's the actual shape of the mystery, why erasing an entire kingdom read as the safer plan next to sending someone in to fight. A rescue that drowns a kingdom to save it still counts as a rescue on paper. Harder to explain is a power capable of rewriting the map itself, answering prayers by sealing Ganon and Hyrule beneath the waves while chosen people took refuge on the mountaintops, and the verdict on who deserves saving gets left in the hands of whoever happens to be holding a sword. The Triforce. The most sacred object in Hyrule can grant a monster's wish and a saint's wish alike, and its clearest built-in safeguard tests balance among power, wisdom, and courage, rather than whether either wish was morally deserved. 3 golden triangles make up the whole thing: power, wisdom, and courage. According to Ocarina of Time, the golden goddesses set the completed Triforce down at the exact spot in the sacred realm where they exited the world they had just finished building, tidy, but not exactly child-proofed. They left the golden triangles behind at that resting place, where later seekers could attempt to claim their power. That's the equivalent of leaving a loaded weapon on a park bench and walking away. Whoever finds it matters more than you'd think. Touch the complete Triforce with a heart that favors one quality over the other two, and it fractures on contact. The finder keeps whichever piece matches what they value most. The remaining 2 pieces travel to 2 people chosen by destiny to balance the split. That is what happened to Ganondorf, Zelda, and Link. Ganondorf's unbalanced heart let him retain power, while wisdom and courage were held by Zelda and Link, the people chosen by destiny to bear the other pieces. Skyward Sword adds the detail that makes this whole arrangement genuinely uncomfortable. The complete Triforce can grant its holder's wish, and the gods who built it specifically designed it so their own kind could never use its power. Princess Zelda theorizes that this restriction was the gods' way of giving hope to mortals. The games show the Triforce granting wishes with radically different outcomes. In Skyward Sword, it ends demise, and in The Wind Waker, the King of Hyrule uses it to wash away his own kingdom. That single design choice turns the Triforce into a mirror, reflecting whatever the person holding it already wants. Skyward Sword says, the true reason the old gods created the Triforce is impossible to know, and Zelda's own hope theory only goes so far. Follow the pattern anyway. an object capable of granting wishes with consequences on the scale of Demise's destruction or Hyrule's drowning, hidden at the precise coordinate where creation stopped, behaves less like a simple gift and more like a failsafe. Somebody forgot to keep supervising, built either to stabilize a universe. The goddesses didn't fully trust to hold together, to test everyone who reaches for it, or to carry a will of its own that nobody has bothered to ask about. Skyward Sword does not confirm any of those proposed explanations as the Triforce's purpose, and fans still argue over which one fits. The Triforce's ultimate purpose remains unresolved, and the sources cited here do not establish a specific Hyrulean motive for preserving access to it. Once a civilization builds the perfect answer to catastrophe, the dangerous question becomes who decides whether that salvation deserves to survive. Ancient Sheikah. Hyrule survived its first calamity, then buried the very machines that had helped save it, leaving them hidden for roughly 10,000 years. The divine beasts, the guardians, the shrines, the towers that carve up the map like a grid of forgotten instructions, all of it was built by the ancient Sheikah roughly 10,000 years before the Hyrule that Link wakes up in. That tech won the war. Then the King of Hyrule grew fearful of the power concentrated in the Sheikah machines and ordered their use and research suppressed. The order came from the throne. The King of Hyrule abolished further research and development into the Sheikah technology and had the machinery buried or sealed away. A monarch of Hyrule looked at the same weapons that had helped the princess and hero defend the kingdom, decided the Sheikah had too much power, and had the machinery buried or abandoned. That's a king disarming his own victory the moment the fighting stopped. The Sheikah people themselves never disappeared. Kakariko is still a living Sheikah village a century before the next calamity, with families, shops, and children living without the ancient machinery. The technological civilization that built the hardware is what disappeared, while the bloodline carrying the Sheikah name kept living in that village long after. Two different disappearances get flattened into one story, and only one of them actually happened to people. Then the buried tech came back, this time on the wrong side. 100 years before Breath of the Wild, Calamity Ganon corrupted the same guardians and seized the same divine beasts that had once defeated him, turning Hyrule's own defense grid into the weapon that slaughtered the champions and burned the castle. The kingdom's ancestors handed Ganon his rematch gear 100 centuries in advance. By Tears of the Kingdom, much of the ancient Sheikah machinery seen in Breath of the Wild is no longer present in Hyrule, and Fujibayashi has said it disappeared after Calamity Ganon was defeated or sealed without explaining how. The people living in that world don't know either. Some players think it got dismantled for parts, others think it was reburied deeper the second time. A smaller theory says the shutdown was automatic, tech switching itself off once its one job was finished. The official explanation still does not choose among those possibilities, leaving the disappearance unresolved. The pattern still makes its own case though. A crown that feared this power enough to bury it once had every reason to erase it again, rather than risk a second Ganon getting his hands on a second arsenal. The hero who first wielded that generation of Sheikah weapons is remembered in the surviving account only by his role, not by a personal name, a title that gets reissued to whichever kid Hyrule's crisis lands on next. Power in Hyrule sits neutral no matter whose hand is on it, and the palace keeps turning that neutrality into policy. Bury the tool, trust nobody, and let the next generation find that hole the hard way. The record identifies the ancient Sheikah as the builders, but it never explains how they achieved technology so advanced that its deeper origins remain one of Hyrule's strangest mysteries. The Zonai. By the time Hyrule is founded, Rauru and Mineru are the last two Zonai the story introduces, survivors of a civilization whose original size remains unknown. Call it a two-person guest list for something Zelda calls godlike. Rauru dies after using his remaining power to seal the Demon King beneath Hyrule Castle, and by the time Link finally gets to shake anyone's hand, it's Mineru's spirit he's shaking it with, preserved in a construct deep below Hyrule. Breath of the Wild leaves a narrower set of clues. Faron ruins, the barbarian armor, and later supplementary material point to a mysterious, savage, or warlike tribe associated with strong magic, the kind that leaves stone markers behind and nothing solid enough to build a face around. Every name and face stayed out of that record. Tears of the Kingdom supplies two actual faces. Rauru and Mineru carry long ears, animal-like features, and a third eye set above their own, and Zelda's account recasts them as a prosperous people said to have descended from the heavens during Hyrule's earliest known era. Rauru marries the Hylian Sonia and becomes the first king of the Hyrule. The game actually shows you the connective tissue between a sky people nobody has documented and a kingdom every player already recognizes. Around it sits proof of what the Zonai could build. Zonai constructs walk and fight on command. Zonai devices bolt fans, wheels, and cannons onto anything a player can imagine. Secret stones sit at the center of the era's biggest miracles, and ruins scatter across the sky above Hyrule, structures nobody has traced back to a homeland. 2 people are standing in for all of it. The homeland stays off-screen, and the population stays uncounted. The record narrows to a king and 1 sage. Rauru dies maintaining the seal on the Demon King, while Mineru's spirit waits in a construct in the depths until Link finds her, and the fate of the rest goes unexplained. Rauru pays for that silence with his own life, leaving behind a spirit that guides Link centuries later and stands beside Sonia again by the story's end. Zelda makes the same kind of sacrifice later, transforming into the Light Dragon and remaining that way through the ages so the Master Sword can be restored and protected until Link is ready to use it. He inherits every one of those decisions without ever getting a vote in how they were made. The same absence that swallowed the engineers behind the ancient Guardians now swallows the Sky Nation. Some fans link to that technology, a connection neither game confirms. Fans have proposed several readings of the gap. Some read the third eye and the godlike framing as literal proof of divine ancestry. Others suspect multiple Zonai cultures existed across different eras, which would explain the gap. The surviving breath of the Wild Era lore treated the Zonai as a mysterious, savage, or warlike tribe from Faron, a description that looks startling beside Tears of the Kingdom's account of Rauru's royal founding. Nothing in either game confirms which reading is correct. One possible explanation is that Hylian scholars worked from incomplete records, patched together from fragments left by people no longer around to correct them, a theory neither game confirms. When history survives as fragments, even a familiar world can become an unstable reflection, complete with people who carry another life behind the same face. Termina. Walk into Clocktown, and you will recognize several familiar faces, and Termina hands the ones it borrows a different name, a different job, and a different life to go with it. The innkeeper Anju resembles an Ocarina of Time character but has her own history, and her fiancé Cafe has been transformed into a child by Skull Kid's curse. Out at the ranch, Romani and Cremia run the dairy under their own names, the clearer echo of the face Termina borrowed. Mayor Dotor wears Talon's face too, minus the ranch, minus the laziness, plus a job title Talon never held in his life. That's either a strange coincidence built into the world itself, or a clue about where the world actually came from. And either answer is a little unsettling once you think about it too long. The official instruction manual settles the baseline plainly. Termina is a parallel world, similar to Hyrule, distinct from it. After pursuing Skull Kid through a passage beyond Hyrule, Link is drawn into that unfamiliar place. On the other side waits a fully inhabited parallel world centered on Clocktown, with exactly 3 days before a screaming moon lands on top of it. Bit of a scheduling conflict for everyone involved, the kind that turns bakery deliveries and marriage plans into afterthoughts. Clocktown sits at the center, and everything else hangs off it like spokes on a wheel. Southern Swamp rots under poisoned water, Snowhead freezes under a mountain crisis that has driven the Gorons toward starvation. Great Bay is caught in a conflict after the Gerudo pirates steal the Zora eggs. Ikana Canyon sits past all of them, a ruined kingdom with its own throne room, royal bloodline, burial ground, and undead remnants of an ancient conflict. 4 regions, 4 different ways for a kingdom to fall apart. Later reference material tried to tidy the whole mystery into one clean sentence. Majora's Mask, it proposed, twisted Skull Kid's memories into the shape of Termina. Canon never states this directly, but the theory has real appeal. It would explain the recycled faces wearing new names. It would explain why the whole place runs on a 3-day loop that resets like a bad dream repeating itself. Tidy, if you don't look too closely at the details. Ikana breaks the theory. The canyon carries a throne room, a burial ground, a dead king, and the lingering history of the composer brothers Flat and Sharp, details that make a simple memory-based origin harder to reconcile. Grief writes faces, governments write history. Some players push further and read Termina's dead and undead characters through a grief-based lens, treating parts of the region as stages in mourning. Nothing in the game confirms it, and the read says more about the people watching than about Termina itself, though the theory keeps circulating among fans regardless. Either way, Link inherits the same debt he keeps inheriting throughout this entire story, a world he never built, breaking apart on a clock he never set, 3 days to solve a catastrophe someone else created before he ever set foot in Termina. The kind of inheritance a buried kingdom like Ikana keeps leaving behind for whoever shows up next. A world assembled from memory raises the oldest version of the same fear. What becomes of a living civilization when its home gets lifted beyond history's reach? Skyloft. Surviving humans are rescued from Demise's attack and sent into the sky, and the story never bothers to say what happens to the rest of Skyloft's population. Skyloft sits dead center of the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword's ending, and it's the strangest kind of loose thread because nobody frames it as a mystery. Hylia lifted a chunk of the land and the humans standing on it into the clouds to keep them out of Demise's reach, a single act of divine engineering. Skyloft survives that evacuation, Demise gets defeated, Zelda chooses a future on the surface, and the Sky Island, where generations of people raised Loftwings and ran an academy, just stays up there, intact and absent from any confirmed long-term plan. Link's and Zelda's Loftwings still fly back into the sky, but the game never says whether the Knight Academy keeps operating above the clouds or what happens to the wider Loftwing population. Zelda makes her choice first. She stays on the surface to guard the Triforce, turning her back on the floating home she was raised in for a world she has only just begun to know. Link stays with her. Together they become the entire founding image the series builds Hyrule out of, two people from the sky, choosing the ground, while the settlement that raised them keeps floating with no confirmed future. The game does show other Skyloft residents reaching the surface once the cloud barrier opens, but traveling down and permanently resettling are two different claims, and Skyward Sword only confirms the first. This is the human cost the series keeps handing to its heroes. The people who get saved rarely get followed home. That same instinct buries temples and locks master swords away, run here on a population instead of a monster or a blade. Hylia solves the apocalypse by lifting people out of it, and the series solves the aftermath by simply moving on without them. Hyrule keeps running this exact play. Seal something away, whether that's a monster in a blade or a population above the clouds, and let the price land on whoever inherits the empty space left behind. Link and Zelda inherit the ground Skyloft was raised to escape, while Skyloft itself had been created to protect the surviving humans and the Triforce. The later Kingdom of Hyrule grows from that ground, while the record never tells us whether anyone maintained contact with the civilization left above it. Later games hand you two candidates that feel like they should be Skyloft's descendants. The Legend of Zelda. Twilight Princess drops you into the decaying city in the sky, still inhabited by the Uka and filled with machinery built for life at altitude. The Legend of Zelda. The Minish Cap gives you the Wind Tribe, another culture that made a home above the clouds. Some fan theories connect both cultures to Skyloft, pointing to the same aerial silhouette and the same instinct to build a life you can fall out of, but neither game explicitly confirms that the city in the sky or the Wind Tribe descended from Skyloft. This connection is worth drawing anyway, labeled honestly as a leap. The available canon provides no confirmed direct line from Skyloft to either culture, but the pattern is hard to ignore. The stronger read, given what's actually on record, treats these as two separate aerial cultures that resemble each other because building a home in the sky is a repeatable solution to Hyrule's worst nights. The resemblance stays suggestive. The lineage stays unconfirmed. What's actually established is smaller and sadder. A founding hero and a founding princess walked away from the place that saved their lives, and the series let that place become scenery. Skyloft is still floating when Skyward Sword ends, its later fate unresolved in the record, above the future kingdom that owes its human beginning to the people Hylia saved. A civilization can survive its descent and still lose the meaning of the hands that made its world, leaving every later miracle to speak for itself. The Golden Goddesses. 3 goddesses shaped the land of Hyrule, established its laws, and brought forth its life, then vanished. Nothing in the record suggests any citizen got the chance to thank them for it. Din, Nayru, and Farore appear in the creation account presented in Ocarina of Time, and their division of labor is exact. Din swung her arms and shaped the Red Land with raw power. Nayru poured out wisdom and gave the world its laws. Farore drew on her courage and filled the land with living things. That's the creation account Ocarina of Time gives you, laid out before the game even hands you a kid who just woke up, holding a fairy he probably didn't want either. Then the 3 of them left, and left here means something very specific. After that, the Golden Goddesses are usually encountered through references and symbols rather than recurring direct conversations, while later stories hand visible protection to other divine figures, including Hylia and regional guardian spirits who watch over particular parts of the world. Later Zelda stories prominently feature Hylia as a distinct goddess, with temples, priestesses, and religious institutions built around her in some eras. Guardian spirits patrol specific regions of Hyrule like middle management. Later on, dragons show up doing hands-on divine work, personally, in the field, while the original three stay silent upstairs. She's either beneath them, a piece of them, or something adjacent, and no game defines which. That gap is exactly where the theories move in. The three modern elemental dragons, Dinral, Naydra, and Farosh, resemble Din, Nayru, and Furore closely enough that fans have pitched them as the goddesses wearing a new shape for a new era. Nothing in canon confirms that swap. Same goes for the idea that the creation myth is Hylian religion dressed up as history, softening whatever actually happened into a bedtime story about three glowing women who did the polite version of the paperwork. The dragon theory leans on real similarities in names, colors, and elemental imagery. The mythologized history reading leans instead on how distant the goddesses stayed from the divine figures who came after them. Neither one gets a citation, and Nintendo has never publicly confirmed the theory. What's left standing is a kid holding a sword he didn't ask for, in a kingdom whose founding document may be, if that mythologized history reading holds, a story retold so many times it hardened into scripture. Heroes in these stories are often handed that inheritance anyway, while the goddesses who signed the original contract remain distant from the conflicts that follow their creation account. When the gods fall silent, one ordinary-looking traveler can carry a power that makes every royal archive feel incomplete. Happy Mask Salesman. He can peel a curse off a child's body and turn the transformation into a mask Link keeps as a memento. Hyrule treats that as day one of a rupee collecting side hustle. The Happy Mask Salesman keeps his shop in Hyrule Castle Town Market, cheerful and overdressed, lending masks to Link to sell around Hyrule. The trading sequence has Link move that stock, return the proceeds, and ultimately receive the Mask of Truth as a reward, assuming a smiling businessman doesn't turn into the most frightening merchant in the kingdom first. Fail to return enough money, and his face changes into a conspicuously angry expression that sharply contrasts with his usual cheerful demeanor. Some fans have discussed that reaction, which still sharply contrasts with his usual cheer. Then Termina happens, and the resume gets stranger. He tells Link that during his travels, an imp in the woods stole an important mask from him. Later, he identifies the stolen item as Majora's mask, and explains why its history makes it dangerous. He describes it as an accursed item from legend, associated with an ancient tribe's hexing rituals, and says that it grants evil and wicked power to its wearer. He gives Link exactly 3 days to bring it back before he must leave this place, as if retrieving a stolen weapon of mass destruction were a scheduling conflict. Along the way, he plays the Song of Healing to restore Link's Hylian form, and the Deku mask materializes as a keepsake of Link's transformation. He handles this particular transformation in a single encounter, without the broader containment process discussed for some other threats in this story, and he does it between sales. The games do not confirm his birthplace, his age, his species under that Hylian face, or his method of crossing between Hyrule and Termina. Link bears the consequences of inherited curses on a child's shoulders, while the Happy Mask Salesman demonstrates specific knowledge of Majora's Mask and the Song of Healing. He runs a mask business and becomes angry when Link cannot repay a mask's price. The games never confirm it, but follow where the pattern points. Everything about him matches someone assigned to watch over exactly this kind of danger long after the people who sealed it away are gone. One theory even casts him as a cheerful in-joke about the man who built this entire universe, which is a fun thought and completely unproven. What stays consistent is the role. The Happy Mask Salesman is shown carrying Majora's Mask, a dangerous item with an only partly explained history. Majora's Mask is an ancient, accursed item associated with an ancient tribe's hexing rituals, and that forgotten history may matter as much as the thief who carried it away. Majora's Mask. A cursed piece of wood convinces a lonely kid to drop the actual moon on a city, and the mask barely has to try. The Happy Mask Salesman tells the story like he's reciting a bedtime tale gone wrong. He calls the object accursed, a relic some ancient tribe used for hexing rituals, and admits its power turned so violent that the same tribe eventually locked it away in darkness rather than keep using it. That admission is the whole surface explanation, and it's thinner than it sounds. The tribe that used the mask in hexing rituals and sealed it away vanished without a name, while the game never explains who created Majora's Mask or how it was made. Zelda has buried whole kingdoms before now with tidier paperwork than this. What the mask does, once it's loose, fills in the blanks the tribe left behind. Skull Kid starts small, playing cruel pranks around Clocktown and stealing Link's ocarina. Then the pranks curdle into something worse. He uses Majora's Mask to set the moon on a collision course with Termina over 3 days, suggesting that the mask's influence may be more than simple puppet strings. Strip the mask off Skull Kid at the end, and the shape underneath gets uglier with the boss fight. Majora's Mask, Majora's Incarnation, and Majora's Wrath fight in succession, 3 transformations of the same mask which sprouts legs and reshapes itself into the next form each time the last one falls. There's a manga chapter, Akira Himekawa's version, where a traveler carves the mask from the armor of a slain beast called Majora. It's a good scene. It also isn't part of the game's canon, and the game itself leaves Majora's origin unexplained, because the game never settles what Majora actually is. A trapped spirit, a consciousness the artifact somehow generates on its own, or just the name attached to a specific kind of magic all remain live readings, and nothing in Termina confirms which one is right. The tribe's identity is an even bigger blank. Canon tells us that it used Majora's Mask in hexing rituals, and later sealed the mask away, but it never tells us who the tribe was. Fans have proposed links to the Twili, the Interlopers, and cultures from Termina's past. The games confirm none of these links. Across the series, some dangerous powers are sealed away and some groups are exiled, which makes the silence around Majora's tribe feel thematically familiar without proving that Hyrule exiled it. What's certain is who gets stuck holding the aftermath. A young traveler is left to confront a crisis unfolding over 3 days, with the moon descending toward Termina and Majora's Mask's origin still unknown. If something can shed one form and step straight into the next without missing a beat, that raises an uncomfortable question about what exactly keeps getting carried forward each time this story starts over. Hero's reincarnation cycle. Demise's dying curse promises his hatred born anew, generation after generation, in an endless cycle that follows those who share the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero. Fans quote that line as proof of a strict reincarnation cycle, but read it closely, and only half of it is that specific. Zelda's inheritance gets a precise word, blood, the kind of thing you can trace on a family tree through generations of princesses. Link's half of the curse gets a vaguer word, spirit, and 3 timeline branches full of different men named Link have spent decades testing what that word is actually supposed to require. Localization adds another layer. Translation differences in Demise's final speech shift the emphasis of that one line, and fans have spent years arguing over the wording like it's scripture, spreadsheets included. The last mystery asked whether a monster's will could steer a body it never fully owned. This one flips that question around and points it straight at the hero instead. The official timeline splits into 3 branches and stacks up numerous heroes across those branches, separated by centuries, wars, and entire collapsed kingdoms. In The Wind Waker, the King of Red Lions tells Jabun that the Link he brought has no connection to the legendary Hero of Time, while the boy's courage and actions establish him as a new hero. The Hero of Time grows up in a forest with fairies for neighbors, chatty ones at that. The hero of Skyward Sword grows up literally above the clouds in the floating settlement of Skyloft, high above a surface world its people don't even know exists. The hero of Twilight Princess begins as an Orden village ranch hand-herding goats, far removed from any established royal upbringing. Different parents, homelands, and personalities give these heroes distinct beginnings, and their stories later draw them into conflicts, but the games do not establish that every hero's childhood was interrupted by war. Nothing in any single game spells out the actual mechanism connecting these heroes. The spirit could be a soul reborn into a new body every time Hyrule needs saving. It could be a destiny waiting centuries for the right person to claim it. It could just be a label the goddess attaches to whoever proves brave enough at the right moment in history. The games never confirm this outright, and the pattern varies from game to game. Some introduce a distinct Link whose courage gets tested fresh in a new adventure, while direct sequels like Zelda 2, picking up as a straight continuation of the original NES game, carry the same hero forward without any reincarnation at all. This pattern makes the spirit of the hero look like a role certain heroes earn under pressure, more than it resembles one soul quietly riding from life to life. A single soul theory remains possible, but the games never establish that later, Links routinely inherit explicit memories from earlier heroes, and they leave the broader mechanism unresolved. If an unseen essence can move between lives, the harder question waits in the opposite direction. What happens when a power arrives as a loan for a single desperate fight and remakes the borrower's whole body before handing itself back? Fierce Deity. One of the most powerful transformations in The Legend of Zelda arrives as a gift, handed over freely, and the being who hands it over is the last one that should want Link to survive the next 10 minutes. By the time Link reaches the top of the moon, he has already surrendered nearly every mask he owns to strange children scattered across it, one trade at a time, no explanation offered. The final child is wearing Majora's mask itself, the same object driving the whole apocalypse. The trade happens without negotiation, a straight swap between a boy and the child wearing the mask he's about to fight. Put the mask on, and Link stops being a child. He grows into an adult warrior with white hair, sharp facial markings, pale eyes that don't blink quite right, and armor-like clothing that looks built for a war the game never explains. He carries the two-handed fierce deity sword, which deals devastating damage and can launch sword beams while Link is Z-targeting. This is an overwhelming power, and Nintendo hands it to a fictional child moments before the final boss. The item description leans into unease, asking the player outright whether this mask's dark powers could be as bad as Majora's. That wording makes this overwhelming power read like a warning label nobody has time to finish. Majora's mask documents the trade and the transformation in exacting detail while staying completely silent on who made the fierce deity who wore it first, or why a monstrous entity's own attendant would hand this weapon to the hero opposing it. Eiji Aonuma once suggested that the best way to think about the mask is that the memories of all the people of Termina are inside it, an interpretation rather than an origin story stated by the game. Majora's Mask never presents that idea in its own text or dialogue. Nothing in the traded dialogue on the moon confirms an origin story exists at all. Everything from here is an interpretation of the pattern the developers left behind. The claim that the fierce deity is definitively evil keeps circulating, though nothing in the games settles it either way. The item text raises a question about danger and stops there, leaving the verdict to the player. Follow it anyway. A dead god, a fallen warrior, or the entire accumulated goodwill of a doomed world are all live candidates, and the strongest version ties the mask to a recurring Zelda theme. Courage borrowed from people who never got a say in how it gets spent. The moon's children hand out masks like a birthday party with unbearable stakes, and this is the one gift that turns a child into the exact shape Termina needs to survive one more night. Like every buried disaster this series keeps handing him, the final child never asks Link whether he wants the power before handing him the mask. Termina gets its ending. After Majora falls, the game gives us no new history for the mask. It remains a special power Link can use in boss battles, with its ultimate fate left unexplained. A power that gives a body to borrowed identity leaves one final scale of mystery unresolved. How much of Hyrule's buried history is still sitting somewhere with a shape you could actually touch? The depths. Hyrule has a second map, and the depths broadly echo the surface below it. Surface mountains often become deep basins underground. Turn the surface map upside down and a broad pattern appears. Mountains often become pits, ridges become basins, and surface water often becomes a blocking wall underground. Surface water in particular tends to sit above a wall of solid rock that stops travel cold. So much for waterfront property. The underground layer stretches across roughly the same general footprint as the surface map, adding a major second explorable layer without adding a new overworld tile, while the game also contains a separately explorable sky layer above it. The correspondence runs across the whole region, sufficiently consistent that players can use one layer to help navigate the other. The light routes make the design even harder to dismiss as coincidence. Every light route in the depths sits at the same horizontal coordinates as a shrine on the surface, a one-to-one grid overlay repeated more than 100 times across the entire map, and each light route sitting directly below its shrine makes the two maps a useful navigation overlay. This is deliberate design work, stacking a hidden layer beneath the one players already trust, though the game never identifies an in-world builder or original purpose for the correspondence. Then the mines start showing up, and the picture gets uglier. Ancient abandoned mines and zonite processing facilities occur in multiple regions of the depths, including central Hyrule and the Goron region. Similar shafts turn up beneath Hyrule Field and beneath Zonai ruins already sealed on the surface above them. The mines are ancient and abandoned, but the game never identifies who excavated the entire network or when the wider digging ended. The game hands over the tunnels and keeps the excavators anonymous, meaning the ground under Hyrule's daily life is older and busier than anyone standing on top of it realizes. The Hyrule Castle Chasm turns that idea from unsettling into literal. Drop through it and the descent keeps going, past collapsed foundations and corridors thick with gloom, until the route ends at Ganondorf's lair and the imprisoning chamber, one of the deepest major story locations in the game. Gloomhands haunt that stretch of tunnel, phantom limbs emerging amid the same gloom associated with the threat sealed below the castle. Hyrule Castle was built over the site where Ganondorf had been sealed, turning the kingdom's seat of power into a lid over its oldest threat. For generations it stood there, the kingdom's seat of power resting over a danger its people barely understood. The evidence for deliberate design between the two maps is strong, but what that design was originally for remains unsettled. Canon leaves the deepest floor, the space beneath the imprisoning chamber, and the ultimate nature of the depths. Inverted geology, forgotten Zonai mine, or an underworld shaped by gloom, as an open question the game declines to answer. What the depths confirm is the same thing every buried temple, sealed spirit, and rewritten history book in this kingdom has been confirming all along. The logic that let the fierce deity's borrowed body keep loaning power to mask after mask across centuries. Hyrule builds its present directly on top of old decisions, and it hands the excavation work to whichever child happens to be holding the sword when the lid starts to crack. Link often inherits a role shaped long before he understands its history, even though each incarnation takes it on under different circumstances. A kingdom resting on someone else's buried mistake, and a body that has to walk down into consequences he never created. Different incarnations of Link can have different appearances. The debt gets inherited anyway, and the sword is just the receipt. The hero's spirit passes down a shovel disguised as a sword, and every Link who has carried it has spent his life digging up a grave someone else filled in first. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.